Lava Bean, and today we'll be making, I don't know, really exciting condiments for your Thanksgiving table to make it unboring. You're not going to be able to stop eating this. Hi, I'm Samin Nosrat, and today we're going to make 3 condiments and toppings to make your Thanksgiving a little bit less boring. I did not grow up with Thanksgiving. My family's from Iran. It was not a meal we really had in my house. So I probably had my first Thanksgiving in college around the time I started working as a professional cook and was learning about what makes a balanced meal and a balanced plate, you know, salt, acid, crunchy things, fat. And then I went to a friend's Thanksgiving and everything was kind of like mushy and bland. Some things were undersalted, some things were oversalted. And I was like, this is a really boring, like it's just not very exciting for the palate. You know, I have this theory about cranberry sauce that's like the only acidic thing on the whole table, which is why people are like putting it on everything. You want cranberry sauce, you want gravy, you want these like creamy, you know, like sour things that will brighten up your plate. So why rely on just one condiment? Why rely on just one thing when you can have more things that will gel really beautifully with the meal? So we're gonna make fried sage salsa verde, a cilantro and date chutney, and my personal favorite, this herby shallot and breadcrumb crunch that you can sprinkle basically on top of anything to make it more exciting and delicious. I love this recipe. It's sort of a play on super simple classic salsa verde, and the reason I insist on frying the sage leaves is I love sage, I love the taste of it. It's a classic Thanksgiving taste to me, but sage leaves are kind of leathery when they're raw and if they're just chopped directly into something, but once you fry them, they crisp up. So even if you're crumbling them into something and they're no longer all the way crisp in the salsa verde, they have a much more delightful texture. They don't get stuck in your teeth in that leathery way. So first we're gonna make the base of the salsa verde. I have a couple of shallots I'm gonna dice. The shallots I'm gonna macerate or just soften in some red wine vinegar. I put a measurement in the recipe, obviously, because people have to do that. It's your job. But all you want is just barely enough to coat the shallot. You're just sort of trying to get a little bit of a softening happening. And all that does is sort of cuts out that like fiery dragon breath. And also then the shallots become like a little acid sponge. And later when we add them into the like oily herbs, they're this little pop of delicious crunchy pop of acid in every bite. And that's what this really needs. You know, that's what the meal really needs, is both crunch and acid. So that's what this is the magic of the dish, is right here. I have some beautiful Italian flat leaf parsley I'm gonna chop finely. I'm gonna get that covered in olive oil. I will say the finer you go here, the more beautiful your salsa will be. It's worth spending the time to make it really nice and finely chopped. I'm just pouring enough oil to sort of cover the parsley. Now we're at the stove, the oil's heating up, and it's really important before you start to have your landing pad ready because this moves quickly. So you just want to have your little skimmer, and I just have a little baking sheet lined with paper towels. My oil's getting hot, and I'm just going to test it with a sage leaf. So that one went super quickly, and the oil's ready. It's a great sign. So we have our fried sage. This is all about tasting as you go. I want mine to be nice and bright, and I want to think of all of the bland, fatty, mushy, maybe salty things I'm going to be eating. So I want this to be a nice contrast to that. So I probably do want quite a lot of the vinegar and definitely all of the shallots in there, but I'm not going to start with all the vinegar. I'm going to start with all the shallots, but not all the vinegar. And also, since it's all oil, it will take salt a minute to dissolve. So I've definitely made the mistake of adding salt, and then 20 minutes later, it's like inedibly salty. So go slow. And then you just crumble. You don't have to be too precious. It's okay if some whole leaves get in there. They'll kind of break down as you stir. I love that sound. I like to taste, if I can, on a bite of whatever the final thing is that I'm eating my condiment with. Or if I can't do that, then I use my imagination. But look at me! I have a turkey breast right here. So So let's just try that. I just happen to have one. It's like exploding in my mouth, fireworks in my mouth. I'm just thinking of that plate. I'm thinking of that plate that I'm making with like creamy mashed potatoes, so much stuffing. I always like a lot of stuffing. All those things, and you're just like, I want contrast. Maybe if this were like a delicate fish, I would have stopped before that acid, but this is not a delicate meal. This is Thanksgiving's not delicate, people. Don't make your condiments delicate. Now I'm gonna make cilantro-date chutney, which is a recipe that's inspired by two of my favorite recipes of Nilofer Ichaporia King, who is one of my favorite Parsi cooks. I kind of thought that these flavors are already a little bit present on the Thanksgiving table, and so they could get kicked up a little bit. There's already ginger, you know, in pumpkin pie. There's just a little kind of like sweet spices kind of already visible. There's dried fruit tastes already present, even if dates aren't a thing that are around. That sweetness is very, very much present on the Thanksgiving table. And so to me, this kind of Indian inspired, Parsi inspired flavor, it was not a huge sort of mental flavor palette leap to make. And also, while I think it's incredibly welcome on the actual day of, I think it's even more welcome on your leftover turkey sandwich. So I'm just gonna go and toast that cumin. It takes like, I don't know, maybe 60 seconds. As soon as you hear the first little pops, that's how you know it's ready. And then I go straight into a mortar and pestle or a spice grinder. I have this really fun thing that my friend's mom gave me. She got it on eBay. I've always wanted one of these. It's called a mini chop. They're like from the 80s. They're so cool. You could do parsley in here, you could do any herbs, you could do dried stuff, you could do fresh stuff, you could do garlic, you could do shallots, you could do whatever. I'm like an infomercial for a mini chop. They don't make them anymore, you have to get them on eBay. I believe in using the tender part of the stem of the cilantro. If you have a spice-loving family, you can leave all the seeds in. I left some of the seeds in, the jalapenos, and took some out. Cumin. I'll do the juice of 1, maybe and a half limes, and then I'll taste it and see if it needs more. Oh, you know what? And also, you want to have a little water on hand. You just need enough water to get the machine going. And then after a certain point, it's just going to start going in circles. And so that's where you add literally the minimum amount of water to turn it into a sauce. I think all of these condiments, you want them just as sour as you want your cranberry sauce. You know, they're all doing that same thing. Think more exciting cranberry sauce. Okay, first of all, this is so good. I'm so excited for people to taste this. I love turkey sandwiches every day of the year, so I especially love them after Thanksgiving. People don't like mayonnaise. I'm making this my way. All of my cook friends, we have a whole thing. We call it MA, because people have a thing about the word moist. I don't personally have a thing about the word moist, but like sandwiches need a lot of MA, moistening agent. So I'm like, there's no such thing as too much sauce in a sandwich. You also need crunch, obviously, hence a lettuce. You know what? This is gonna get cranberry sauce and this is getting a triple MA. This is a triple MA sandwich. I mean, also maybe it's a quadruple MA if you consider avocado an MA. Oh, you know what? I'll make it MA boat. The thing about it is everyone is a sandwich artiste in their own right. So I'm not gonna tell anyone how to build their sandwich, but I believe that sandwiches should be like really crunchy, really moist. That's the tallest sandwich. It's just very bright and fresh. My mouth, I'm just talking with my mouth. My grandmother is just like, what are you doing? And now, not that I'm allowed to have favorites, but I have a favorite. I learned how to make Thai and Cambodian style fried shallots last year. They're so easy, like as far as fried shallots go, because you start it in cold oil and you just bring them up and you cook them really slowly and they emerge like perfectly golden and fried, and they're just the perfect thing to put on top of anything. They're so delicious. And I kept thinking, like, what else could I put in there to make it Thanksgiving-y and crunchy and delicious? And so I was like, oh, you could just fry bread in that same oil, because that shallot oil is so delicious. So then you can get that shalloty taste in the fried bread. Then we can also reuse that oil a third time and make a little bit of fried herbs. And then out of that comes this incredible topping. So naturally, the most obvious place to use that for at Thanksgiving is on top of something like green bean casserole or a potato gratin or anything baked that you would be putting fried onions or breadcrumbs on top of. Oh, mac and cheese, that would be a good place. This is your friend. This is your year-round friend. You want them to be like no bigger than like a crumbled walnut or something like that. And then the only other thing to do really is slice some shallots. All right, so now we're gonna go over to the stove to do all the frying stuff. It's important to have everything ready because it kind of goes quickly. Like once all of a sudden you're like, oh, it looks like it's done. And then all of a sudden it's overdone. So it's important to have everything ready so you can get off the stove the second you need to get off the stove. And by everything, I mean 2 trays lined with paper towels or 1 larger tray. And then we're gonna have the pot that we're gonna do our frying in with our shallots, which we start, this is kind of like mind-blowing, but you start with cold oil. So you can go ahead and add the 2 cups of oil and the shallots into 1 pot. And then you wanna have another pot set up with a strainer to move into. It's just like, so I'm just gonna turn it on over kind of medium-high heat. The visual cue is kind of like a vigorous bubbling, not quite a boil, but like a vigorous simmer. And once it comes up, we just turn down the oil to kind of like a medium low, and that's where it'll stay the whole time. The shallots take a little longer than 20 minutes, and you want them to get to like a honey caramel. They actually will turn 2 shades darker as they cool down. So you just kind of need to stay nearby and every minute or so come and give them a stir with a fork or a chopstick or like a wooden spoon or something like that to just keep them from sticking and allow the steam to release. But this is truly one of the most pleasant types of frying you'll ever do. So we did all our frying. Oh, listen to that. Listen to that. Ah, this you can crumble. You could do all of this frying a day in advance and keep all of these wrapped. Just gonna chop a little thyme and parsley. This adds that little fresh touch, the vibrant aliveness. The fried herbs are those Thanksgiving herbs, and again, like they're woodier plants and they're woodier herbs. And cooking them sort of releases a lot of that flavor into the oil, into the food, and into this crunch. Whereas these are, you know, these are the fine herbs, parsley and thyme, and they have a completely sort of much more fresh taste to them. And that's why I like adding them. It kind of brings this like freshness into the topping. I've never had green bean casserole, never once in my whole life. This is my first bite ever. It's so good. What I hope that this does is makes frying a little less scary for people. I've not like spent my life frying shallot rings. It's not a thing I do all the time. But even in the last several months, as I've made this a bunch of times, I think that this wonderful method, you know, from Southeast Asia of bringing the shallots up from cold is just such a friendly way to cook. And you get this incredible thing that's just so delicious. And once you do it and you're comfortable with it, you can adapt this in all of these different ways and eat this all the time on everything. My hope for these recipes and all my work is that it just makes people a little more comfortable in the kitchen, a little happier at the table, and that's all I hope for this, is that it makes your Thanksgiving a little more joyous, a little less boring, and a little more fun. So go find these recipes and everything else you need for Thanksgiving at New York Times Cooking. Sound sync. Sound sync. Fava, it's your moment.